but it's kind of your meeting overall. If you want to, since he's not here, if you want to start, or you want to wait for me?
Well, we want your member to be present.
You could do our roll call while we're waiting for Stacy.
And our minutes.
Sure. All right, so I call to order this meeting of the Planning and Zoning Commission, Thursday, July 27th at 2023. It's 5:30 p.m. This is a hybrid meeting. Some of our members are on Zoom and some are present. If you wouldn't mind, just I see Kathy, Angela, and Todd, Peter, and Lishay. Is that correct?
Correct.
You got
And you have Charles by Zoom.
On Zoom, I have myself and Charles. So I think we are complete. And for staff, we have Phil, Ron, Jana, who's not our staff member, but anyway, Jana. And we also have our council liaison, Dan Enright. And Piper. And Ally, sorry. Didn't
And
see-
Erica.
And there.
And Erica. Some of you are off the camera.
Yeah.
All right, our first item of business as P&Z is the approval of the minutes of June 22nd, 2023. Do I have a motion? Thank you, Kathy.
I move to approve the Planning and Zoning Commission minutes of June 22nd, 2023 as presented.
second.
Thank you, Angela. All in favor? Yes, raise your hand, those in the room. The minutes are unanimously, I think, approved. All right, we can now, Mark, are you all here? Do you want to do?
We're
your
all
meeting?
set. Thank you, Eleni.
Go for it.
We will call the HARC meeting of Thursday, July 27th, joint meeting with P&Z at 5:32 p.m. at Rebecca Hall. We'll go ahead and take the roll call.
Bob Mather,
Matt Lee,
Kieran Lannon,
Stacy Lake,
Mark Shamba.
Andrew Williamson.
Thank you all. We have the one review and recommendation item to P&Z, and then we will vamonos. This is the title of Land Use Code Commitments. It's a review and recommendation from HARC to the Planning and Zoning Commission regarding amendments to Land Use Code Article 3, Division 1, General Article 3, Division 2, Zone District Purposes, add additional standards, Article 7, Division 1, Historic Preservation Overlay District, and Article 7, Division 2, Alteration, Addition, and Election for the purpose of establishing limits of basement areas for the scale of certain HARC applications on hillside lots. Staff member Jana Wenzel, and I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mark. Thanks, everybody, for being here tonight. Thanks, P&Z, for allowing us to join you in your meeting. Thanks for HARC members for showing up tonight at this special meeting. So we've all talked about this many, many times. I will summarize in just a moment. Hopefully there will be no surprises to HARC. They've seen it one more time than P&Z has, but we will walk through actual code amendment language. So we have, oh, you can all see that it's a bit small. Let's see if I can make it bigger. We have had we have had, I believe, 9 meetings on the code amendments since April. After tonight, this should be the last time we all talk about these amendments. Our hope is that we will go to town council on August 1st for our first reading, and then proceed to the second reading and finalization of the code amendment. So it's been we've done it quickly, but it's been kind of a long, feels like a long drawn out process, but thank you all for sticking with it. I feel like we've had some really productive conversations, and I'm happy to be hopefully wrapping this up tonight, hopefully. So I want to stress, first of all, that the code amendments that we're talking about regarding basements and steep lots only apply to residential type zone districts. So that means the residential, medium density residential, historic residential, hillside developing 1 and 2, and hillside transitional. This does not apply to any of the commercial zone districts, including accommodations or accommodations 2. So we've talked previously each time about the goals of these amendments. Some of them will be addressed in the land use code amendments. Some of them will be addressed in a new section of the design guidelines, specifically addressing steep lots. And then the final goal that was identified regarding environmental impacts will be addressed in the climate action plan implementation. So I'm going to jump into the code amendments themselves. I'm going to just go over each section fairly quickly, but jump in if you have questions or need clarification. So we propose to add a new section to the code to distinguish between lots that are over 25% and lots that are under 25% split, again, in those residential type zone districts. So we had determined that we wanted to eliminate double basements. There are a few ways to look at this. The first, it's really easier to look at the illustrations. This first illustration is showing a relatively flat lot, in which case one basement would be permitted up to 12 feet deep, but no second basement or sub basement would be permitted below that. On lots that have a slight slope but are still less than 25%, we are proposing that because the lowest level, even if it's considered a basement, may daylight at an alley or rear of a lot, that doesn't feel like a basement. So under the post-construction low point would be allowed one full basement, again, no more than 12 feet below the finished floor. And that is essentially what this says. Any questions or comments or clarification on that before I go to steep lots? I wanted to show you, I found actually an example of this, real life example that was approved a few years ago. And this shows the situation where we have a not so steep slope. Part of the lowest level is underground, but it does daylight in the back for the garage. And in this case, a basement would be permitted below that lowest post-construction point.
So John, I have a question.
Sure.
Post-construction, does that mean people could change the grade of their lots to allow part of it to be lower and exposed to, so it's partly, so that where the car is, for example, in this illustration was actually dug out to be there and they come down from the pre-existing grade?
It's possible. However, pre-construction grade could also be higher. And so I guess we were trying to be consistent with the other addition to those lots that are steeper, and that is the same language. So it feels like whatever the final finished floor is would be the measuring.
Thank you.
John, that shows a second floor, as I calculate it, if you start with 0 at this basement level. Second floor window well. I thought we were getting away from those.
So that's I guess that's the point of this. This is not below grade. This is garage. And so there would be a second level allowed below that. So on the back of this house specifically, this is the only basement right here, only level below grade. Towards the front of the house, you would have perhaps an area that is 2 levels below grade, which is what we were trying to get away from.
Yes.
But this is a compromise for these lots that have a slope that is less than 25%, but more than 1%. more than 10%. We had a robust discussion at Hark last week, and Hark felt that this was a compromise that because this lowest level doesn't feel like a basement, that a basement, another level should be allowed below. I will say on flat lots, as illustrated here, if the lot is flat, there's no access above grade, then one full basement would be permitted. In this case, again, one full basement is permitted below a level that's maybe considered a basement per our land use code, but also daylights on the sides and the rear. Anybody from Hark want to jump in?
We discussed that a lot. I think
We went through a number of what ifs. And thanks to the architect, and we had one rogue elephant attend our meeting, your members. Who did some calculations and a number of what ifs throughout town. And I've never actually seen, in addition to staff, that kind of effort by the board. So we hope, well, when we get all done, we'll be glad to answer any questions, but we hope you'll see the logic of what we did.
I think this on the right feels like 1.5 levels, not a double basement, but 1.5 levels below grade. And we had initially not talked specifically about this situation on the lesser steep lots.
Jonna, just say, I think what we ended up with last week and talking about it was, I think, consistent with the way Aspen, which example had been mentioned to us in earlier meetings as a allowing not more than some 15 feet or whatever it was below low grades, with that for comparison as well.
I'm sorry, Peter, could you say that again? Are you saying that this supposed compromise is what they did in Aspen too?
I think I don't want to misspeak on this, but my understanding when it was introduced is this is how Aspen has contemplated limiting basements, but that in instances where there was a lower grade, you were allowed one level of basement below that, which is all I'm saying is what I think where we landed and what you're showing on the right of those examples.
It's similar, not the same calculation, it's similar.
No,
effect,
but it's a,
the
yeah, it's a-
outcome. And by the way, we went through a number of numerical examples, trying to just tie numbers to this. And every time we did it, we found exceptions that were not reasonable when we went
So-
through examples.
The Aspen example reminds me that the overarching goal is to prevent 3 or 4 levels below grade, or the underground basketball court, I guess is the Aspen example that we all kind of took and decided we wanted to avoid. So so this is where Hark landed last week. Any other?
So specifically, with respect to where we started the question, if you could go back to the other illustration, there would not be a double window well in the front of this basement? Or there would be a double window well in the front of this basement, or how would the window wells work?
There could be, yes.
Todd has something to say.
Oh, I'm sorry, Todd, I didn't see your hand.
Well, and from the point of view of health and safety, are we concerned that we are continuing to allow the proliferation of underground habitable space that really shouldn't be?
Yeah, that's been my concern.
And they
Has-
have no way of checking on that once a CO has been placed. But
All right,
Kathy has her hand up. Eleni?
Kathy, thank you.
I kind of agree with Todd. If you jump back to the other illustration of the two. Yeah, it seems to me that if we did not allow the basement under the deeper half, so they got like a basement under the garage back half of the house, whatever we're calling it, under that half, where you just have a single window well, the idea of people escaping up a double window well in the middle of the winter, it's not gonna happen. People are gonna die. And, it's not the aesthetics, it's not the size of the house. To me, it's the life safety issue of having a double window well. And so if you just didn't let them put the basement back the full distance,
Right.
then you wouldn't have the storage room that turned into a media room with no source of exit, and the kids are having a slumber party.
Yeah, I mean, this was one of the main concerns of P&Z about double basements. We talked about double window wells quite a bit. And it seems that we are still stuck with that concern.
Was there any discussion about having half of that section remain?
We did, actually, Matt had some examples of, you will explain it better, but more of a parallel, slope below grade.
Yeah, it was, I showed several sort of quick sketches of a parallel slope method, and I'm gonna surmise that the board generally thought that it might be difficult to calculate that and sort of an unnecessarily difficult way to both for an applicant and for staff to sort of calculate, understand that. I was measuring to the bottom of the foundation. Sort of the end of that discussion, Jonna offered up this possibility, and I think everyone sort of nodded their head and said, this seems a simpler way to calculate and to understand this. I haven't contemplated the sort of egress from a double basement. I'd imagine that the building code might have something to say about that. as far as
No.
life safety.
Yeah.
We've built them. I've built double window wells. I'm pretty sure no one would get out of and they needed to.
So the
As
building
the-
code does require an egress from every so often in a space. And so if there cannot be a window well that is only one window well, wouldn't that be like the part where the space, the line where the basement should stop? Like the basement can go back as far as it can while there's still an egress consistent with the building code that is only one story. Isn't that a pretty simple way of defining where the basement has to stop?
Lenny, I'm gonna add this, Peter.
Thank you.
I think I understand the question that you're posing, and I'd say you can have all sorts of uses for basements that don't require egress. Yet when you have bedrooms, you have to have egress. Other living spaces or even less than that don't require anything close to it. So I don't think feasibility of egress well locations is going to be a limitation to applications.
Thanks for the clarification. Yes,
John, I was just thinking, has the building department expressed any dismay over double window wells or any?
They've not been asked to review this because it's beyond our purview. to
But we as lower
considering
boards are
building.
considering code issues.
So right now we see window wells 3 stories deep on the hillside. I guess I don't recall the conversation about the excessively deep window wells, but they are being built now because we have a half dozen double basements being under construction right now. So and I think the building code is beyond our discussion with these boards.
Lenny, Kathy has a question.
Kathy.
I just wanted to ask, we have a number of architects on both boards, what they think of the idea that, there's the second basement on the one with the green, the 2 levels basement being half deep, so it can't be contrived that you built this huge storage room that everyone knows is going to turn into a bunk room 10 minutes after the building department leaves. What do you guys think about that? How can we make it so that the egress is 1 or 1.5 story and, window well instead of 2 and 2.5 story window wells? What do we do to make that?
Well, so firstly, I think as a board, we're pretty enthusiastic about what Matt brought. This sort of idea of almost like a parallel slope, but underneath.
Right,
parallel
that's
slope.
true.
Mhm.
The problem is we talked about it for what, an hour? And we came up with so many instances of where it started to break down and fall apart, be really hard to interpret, really hard to apply, really hard to verify. I mean, in just an hour and a half, we came up with enough difficulties with that method that we backed away from it.
You want to comment on life safety though?
Well, no, I mean, look, life safety is super important, right? It's one of the private founding goals of my job as an architect, right? But it's also not my job to look into the future and try to limit what people can do in the future. If a building department, which is specifically tasked with reviewing egress, doesn't have a problem with this, then as a board member, neither do I.
But we don't know if you do.
I don't
Yeah,
recall
so
that
Peter has his hand up, I think.
coming up. I don't recall in prior meetings, safety coming up. I hear you guys mentioning it here and may have, and I missed it. I have had conversations about egressing out of taller than one level deep window wells, and it's been pretty straightforward and pretty predictable. I have not a member of the fire department. I have not really interviewed anybody else, but I've not run into a challenge with it. It's not been brought to my attention that there's a safety concern or something we need to administer differently.
Anybody else have any comments on from P&Z?
Yeah, Lenny, I have a question too. The other thing that we've been always, at least I've been talking about, is site drainage. Placement of things like irrigation systems, snow storage and drainage in the 3-foot setback that is precluded by a window well. And so how would we solve that issue, or has this attempted to, or?
John, I think that's a question.
On my own, I reached out to 2 civil engineers and a hydrologist. And their first question was, where's your data? And they said, without data, you can't have an opinion about what projects are doing to site drainage. The hydrologist I talked to recommended that we start requiring subsurface water record keeping for a period of 5 years after a project is finished to try to determine what's going on. He also was pretty clear he didn't want to wade into a political conversation. But beyond that, there was a lot of discussion about how the soil in Telluride percolates very, very well. And from my own experience on numerous projects let's say north of Colorado Avenue, there is no water coming out. We don't have to dewater these sites before and during. The foundations aren't overly waterproofed. I mean, they meet a standard for regular construction, but we're not building raft foundations north of probably Pacific even. I'm not trying to be dismissive of this as an issue. I'm not sure that we have the data to really have an informed discussion.
Any other questions from P&Z, or should we let John continue?
Speak up. Tara.
I do.
Yes.
I think what Angela was saying is maybe not the whole house displacing underground water, but it's like, if you have a window well, it's got to be 3 feet wide. If you're built 3 feet from the sight line, that takes up all your property, and you're not supposed to push the water from your roof, rain, the snow, whatever, onto your neighbors. So that leaves no room. I think is, my concern. It leaves no room for where the surface runoff is going to go. And I'm not sure you can have a dry well above the window well that's really going to function to take all the water below the window well and on down into its merry way. I also have built houses north of Colorado Avenue who have leaked in their basements despite Zypex and raft type structures. And I know of one now that's leaking at this moment. So there is leakage in the residential zones, believe it or not. There's also very porous areas where you could dumped water all day long and it would go away.
So I think the discussion at P&Z, just for the benefit of the part, was that we were concerned about the cumulative effect of squeezing any kind of runoff into these troughs between buildings where there's really no effective drainage. So one building gets away with it, what does the next one do? And then on and on. So I'm not sure how we address that. They say, well, where's your data? Well, tell us what data needs to be collected. Do we need groundwater monitoring wells? We do that for water quality on the valley floor. I mean, it's not unheard of. As we begin to build these out, is there a cumulative impact? So that was where the nature of the question came from.
I'd like to see if any of the other architects who are practicing day to day and dealing with this have something to say, but I would preface it by saying I was probably most concerned by the suggestion you made if they have, you know, an egress well here and I have been on and done several projects where there was an egress well next door and Flight Hillside. And you know, there needs to be some coordination, which I've always seen done. But even in a case which was not a project I was involved in, where I saw them face to face with the dry well down below, the percolation that the practicing architects were speaking of, they didn't have any water problems and migrating down to these dry wells. In fact, it was better than it had been before. But would you like to share some of your experience from every day designing these wells and see if anybody has any concern or other examples that it's not a problem?
Yeah.
Chris?
We haven't experienced any problems. Every window well we do, code requires them to be heated and drained, right? And we normally have a dry well above the window well that then hits the bottom of the window well and then percolates down or whatever. We haven't studied, we haven't had any issues with them. But assuming the civil engineer knows what he's doing with those, right? Because there's one on every project and we go through public works and work through the drainage with them. And for the safety of the window wells, I don't have a concern.
If they're too deep.
Safety, yes,
Yeah.
because they're heated.
Yeah.
And they're, in my opinion, they're safer to climb up the ladder than they are to jump off the second story window into the snow pile that's there. So I think for all the work that we did in the solution we came up with last week. I don't even know that it's a compromise. I mean, we went through so many things to try to value this, and there was always exceptions.
Yeah. Yeah, it really wasn't a give and take. Oh, okay, so we'll settle on this. It was
We tried
the final
everything.
solution.
Somebody was gonna find
Yeah.
a way to get around it.
It
This
was-
the best solution.
and simple for staff to administer
Yep.
and not worry about calculations. But any other practicing architect like to, or leave this topic, Mika?
I guess I'm curious if what you're talking about, are you concerned with a window well impeding surface runoff? Or are you concerned with
Yes.
the deep basement impeding water moving through the soil on a steep side? What's
Do
the,
we know either one? If it happens, it sounds like the accumulation of added runoff from roofs on these buildings. I'm particularly concerned about the verticality in terms of the slope,
Mhm.
creating additional velocity in runoff. But essentially, the concern is these back-to-back window wells, how they're treated. And thank you, Chris, for the explanation of that heated situation, which sounds pretty unsustainable, but whatever, they're paying for it. And then the health and safety, we haven't asked the building department, so I guess we're assuming that they think it's okay. So we were just bringing up some larger site concerns as these places begin to build on over 25% in particular. I know this is what this is
Well,
addressing.
we also had the second concern that was mentioned, which is if we have a whole row of largish houses with deep basements, double or more, in some cases more, and they all present this deep concrete wall to the hillside, what happens to the water? Will it go between the houses? And if so, does that channel the water in ways that are bad for the properties below? Or, or creates other drainage problems? And you're right, we don't have any data. We don't know. We're just starting, these things are just starting to be built. But it's still a reasonable concern. And it's a reason that some jurisdictions don't allow building on, steeper slopes. Now, what we're looking at here is the slopes of less than 25%. Maybe we should let John talk about what your proposal is for steeper slopes.
Yeah, and just in closing on the issue, again, we went through a number of examples. This is more stringent than Aspen. It's more stringent, we feel, than what we were even asked to do. And there was unanimity, and this is from people who are doing it every day. And the dry wells are the key. And as Chris pointed out, with the heated dry wells, even if it's 2 stories, I don't see anybody here that says they have any concern about safety. Is that true or false?
Well, it's not that I don't have any concerns.
No, about this specific situation.
I think that there's 2 other things to throw out there real quickly with regards to life safety. All of these homes, not all, there's always one that's not, but these are all going to be fire sprinkled.
Right.
So, that's an important thing to keep in mind. And secondly, the window wells as true egress spaces would only be allowed under a historic house that had been lifted. And again, we're looking at a diagram that's more simple than that, but in new construction, I don't think anyone's going to put a 2-story window well in for light. And it might. They're not cheap, which I guess we've decided is no barrier to anything anymore.
Yeah.
I think that's why the image John has shown on the next page did not have a double window well further back, because they're not bedrooms back there. And so there's no egress requirement.
Okay, are there more questions from P&Z, or should we let John move on?
I have
sounds-
just a comment about sort of
Sure.
drainage on the back. So taking the example of a row of houses that are built on a steep hillside, and concern, what I'm assuming the concern is that's making sort of a dam for water.
Yep.
Well, so in my experience, behind these walls, you need to have capillary breaks, so the water can't push hydrostatic pressure on a wall and collapse it. So generally, there's several layers of drains, some at the surface, some at the very bottom of the foundation, some mid, that capture water at certain points and bring that either to dry wells or to daylight, or have some other mitigation strategy that happens. That's generally how it's built, because folks don't want to spend a lot of money on these houses and if there is water, have them push them off the hillside. So I have no concern with that. I think it's maybe best to reach out to civil engineer or a geotech to get more understanding of that. If there is a concern, I think the place to deal with that would be within the building department, so that there are strategies to mitigate that hydrostatic pressure against these walls.
Okay, thank you.
One quick last little comment too, on drainage. These projects with basements, whatever kind of configuration on a steep hillside, or in town, they are creating an obstacle, waterproof basement, but they are backfilled with free draining gravel. And it is like one big dry well all the way around. I
The
think
French
what
dry.
I have heard very casually, not based on data, is that the capacity for retaining runoff on site goes up tremendously, even with the introduction of a basement, compared to what was there, which was slower, but had a larger natural undisturbed area below ground. I think on the hillside, a lot of these things too, as often as not, I am imagining there is bedrock and the water is perking down and it hits that bedrock, whatever that profile, whatever is, and it rides it down. And your dry well on a steep hillside that's sitting on bedrock's kind of not doing you a darn thing anyway. It's just riding the bedrock down. So I don't know anything more about that, but it's not a dam. It's not simple either. I think bedrock complicates it in other ways, but it's often where it ends up.
Eleni, this is Todd.
Thanks, Ed.
I appreciate the input that Hark has given us. As P&Z, we sat here and tried to imagine what the challenges and the obstacles and the risks were. And without Peter being at that one particular meeting, we don't have the professional input that you guys are bringing to it. And to say, appreciate that. It eases my mind. And Stacy, we don't have data, nobody does. But every incremental dam that we put up there is changing things. And maybe someday we'll have to do that.
No, I think it is very helpful to hear about mitigation strategies and the effect of what's being done. We didn't have that information. Obviously, our concerns are things that you guys have also thought about, and there are ways for engineers and architects to address. If we don't have more questions, should we let Johnny go on?
Yeah.
Okay, great.
Okay, good discussion. Thank you. So actually moving on to the steeper slopes, which we have discussed as 25% or greater. Again, only in residential districts. This example, I think everyone has seen before, in that on the hillside, we may have situations where we have 2 or 3 levels considered basements as our per our definition in the land use code. But in this case, the direction was to prevent any further digging below the lowest finished level. And so the way we've defined that is that residential and accessory or secondary structure shall have no floor levels that are below the post-construction grade low point of the building site coverage. Similar principle to the previous, that you can dig into the hillside, but you can't dig down into the hillside.
So your description there works for downhill lots, Jonna, where access is from above.
It would be, it would not, no. Well, that's not true, actually. I'm looking at the car. It would apply because even on a downhill lot, it would have a post-construction grade low point. So whatever that is, you couldn't have a basement below that.
That was my read on it
Okay.
just now.
Yeah. And
Does anybody else read?
forget in the car.
Right.
Yeah, and the grade is defined as the building footprint
It's the
grade.
building footprint. or
It's not the
site
lot
coverage.
grade, but
No,
it's,
it's not the lot grade, it's the site coverage of the building. And actually, Peter, I may make another illustration with the car at the top to illustrate.
I think that's a great idea.
I'm gonna
Yep.
put that one.
Yeah.
There's a
Um,
comment.
We're in question.
We need the,
Question
could you
time.
hold your question, but don't forget it. And when we get to public comment after she's finished, then you're on.
Okay. Everyone happy with this?
Yeah, I love the car on top photo, diagram to go with
Okay.
it. Yeah.
I'll add that. Okay, we also discussed the site coverage bonus area. The code right now allows a site coverage bonus area in residential, historic residential, and transitional hillside zone districts. This is an existing provision in our land use code from about eight or 9 years ago. We the goal was to clean this up. I think everyone on Hark and P&Z wanted to keep this as a possibility for designers to use. This is for additional below grade basement space. So we did clean it up. We're trying to make it easier for the user to understand and for staff to implement. So under number 1, we had talked about eliminating the projection of up to 18 inches above grade if it's below a porch or a deck. Hark felt strongly that that should be kept. It's not visually impactful, but we did add a sentence requiring detailed plans illustrating the treatment of those areas so that we can ensure that there are no windows planned or other elements that are not allowed in the code. So that was one clarifying sentence. I think I've gone through these previously in other meetings. I don't think anything else has changed, but on number 3, we're eliminating the last sentence, which is just a redundancy of number 2. Under number 4, again, just clarifying that the site coverage bonus area is 10% of the lot area up to a maximum of 525 square feet. Number 5, we discussed, I recall that right now the site coverage increase cannot be located less than 3 feet from the side yards. We think that should be from every property line, front, back, and sides. And everyone seemed to be in agreement about that. Number 6 was clarified because of our limitations of the levels of basements below grade. We're saying, should the site coverage increase be applied to more than one level below grade where permitted? So on the steeper lots where you do have more than one basement, by definition, you could have more than one level of bonus site coverage, but not on the less steep lots. And then number 7, we added the site coverage increase area shall not affect the height of building, which is the opposite of what it says now. It doesn't seem to make sense to measure the building from an area that's entirely below grade, not visible. So we hope this will help clarify the intent of this section and help the users of it apply it more regularly.
Do P&Z have any questions about this part? Speak up, I can't see you because.
No, Eleni, I don't.
Well, I do know Kathy, Peter, Stacy, and myself, and Bob, before Jonna, worked on this for over a year. So you remember the result was we reduced the setbacks even further, and then this was part and parcel of that. And I think this cleans it up for staff and helps corral any rogue elephants trying something different. So good job, Jonna.
Okay, thanks for all the input. I will move on to the next one. The next one was to align the floor area with the Hark scale. We have found that on the hillside lots, a lot of times the actual total floor area is not clearly represented by that which is above grade. And so since we measure floor area above grade, a lot of these new projects are insubstantial or minor scale applications. We feel that those should be small scale review by the full Hark board. And so we added a section that says, this is an addition to the section of activities located outside of the historic district, but this also already applies within the historic district. That's why we're not adding it. It's already there. But any new construction of principal structures on lots with a pre-construction grade or slope of the building site coverage of more than 25% or greater, regardless of floor area. So even if your total floor area is 900 square feet, which would now be an insubstantial application, it's automatically going to be reviewed by the full board.
Good.
Any
Okay.
questions? No, I don't think we have any questions.
Nothing, okay. We discussed at some of the last meetings, limiting or reducing the parallel slope height. I showed you some data where in most of the residential districts, other than Hillside Developing 2, the maximum parallel slope is 30 feet. Most of the projects are just about at 30 feet. In Hillside Developing 2, the maximum parallel slope height is 31 feet, and very few of the projects so far have even approached that height. There was quite a lot of back and forth about this. It seemed at first everyone was a bit ambivalent about it because no one's taking advantage of it. Do we need to change it, or should we change it because no one's taking advantage of it? The consensus from the last HARC work session was to leave it alone. And there are certain lots on the hillside that may actually, because of the steepness of the lot, require the additional height. We are addressing the stepping back in the design guidelines, which I'll get to in just a minute. But right now, the proposal does not affect or change the parallel slope height limits in any of the zone districts.
Questions? Yes.
Clarify here too. I think in the discussion last week with HARC, the 31 feet and that height compared to the prevailing hillside topography, it looks like it's nowhere near it. But when you looked at it with the post construction on these uphill above access lots where you're cutting into the hill substantially, the depth of those cuts that are platted are quite challenging, and were at least a part of my opinion with why not to adjust or reduce that allowable height. And I think shy of looking at maybe some of those properties in greater detail, it seemed easier to say 31 feet was functional and necessary. Just to clarify.
Add to that. Another big part of the discussion was that HARC does have the responsibility and the authority, to say, it's too massive, the massive scale is wrong. It needs to be reduced, it needs to be changed. And we have that ability to do that. So we didn't feel like changing that 31 or 30 feet was necessary.
John, is this something that the new guidelines will address or give HARC additional guidance on, or? Are they...
Yes, and actually that's the perfect segue into the next section, because I think the proposal is to add a section to the design guidelines in the special standards, which apply to steep lots, which again would be 25% or greater. And this part of it is borrowed from existing treatment areas of transitional hillside and developing hillside. But this section would apply to any treatment area as an additional overlay of a treatment area to any of these lots that are affected. So this kind of reinforces and emphasizes the expectation that the building should reinforce the topography that it's on of the site, that the roof form should also reinforce the topography, that the materials should blend in with the hillside, and that the landscaping and grading of these sites should not be terraced every 10 feet to create lawn space, but they should be restored to a more natural, or the most natural character as possible. So the essence of these that are new and would be added are to address those concerns, like you said, Eleni, that we didn't decide to change with the parallel slope, but would hopefully give HARC a little bit more teeth to expect that these structures would respect the hillside. I'm happy to read through them. Maybe you've had a chance to read through them on your own, and I won't have to, but do you have any comments or questions about any of these specifically? HARC had some pretty robust dialogue about some of the wording of them, and if there's any concern still, let's talk it out.
No, I guess I'd like to hear if HARC has any remaining like thoughts or comments?
I'll just add that I think this is not only teeth, but it gives applicants guidance to how to blend their project in with a steep hillside.
Yeah,
Donna, how is this going to be applied? We're not gonna have a new zoning map with all the areas in town that are over 25%. As an applicant, have to demonstrate
Steepness.
This is only applied to lots that are 25% or greater at the site coverage. So this will be in the special standards section, which also contains exterior lighting and alley and sheds
but at the site coverage of the proposed, not within the setbacks, for instance, or within the property line.
no, it should be consistent with the land use code.
If one maybe wordsmith clarification, by the way, staff came up with this whole new section to deal with this under special standards, which have helped us adjudicate more, I should say, analytically versus interpreting. So it's given us, some people said more teeth, but I think just better, sharper tools. But my question on 1A is, and I may be the only one, it says if 3 or more stories are proposed, those levels should be set back substantially from the street. The examples that we have heard about made me think that maybe we wanted to say these upper levels shall be set back, because there are some PUDs, there are some areas on the hillside where we want to bring it down the hill. We don't want to see it cascading up the hill, which, by the way, that was what started all this, when there was a photo of a quote unquote, the cruise ship, as we all called it. But remember, even without the teeth in these guidelines, they lasted 20 minutes and they were asked to go redesign, just so you know, if you haven't attended any of our meetings lately. So, but my question is, do we need to add the upper levels? Because some might start 5 feet from the street. I know there's a couple examples I can think of. Or am I the only one that thinks it should be the upper level? Because we want to push down the hillside. Any other comment?
I've sort of comment on that. I'm familiar with lots on the hillside that are 0 setback kind of by design. And so that specific number 1 you brought up, Mark, can be interpreted that all 3 levels need to step back or start setback and so on. So I do think, as a sort of an awareness to some of the need for the development to be clustered at the road as close and tight to it, but at the same time address Park's concerns about stepping back as it goes up. I think there hopefully is a way to word that doesn't sort of capture all of it and defeat underlying sort of setback.
Yeah, I don't want to go
expectations.
through all this and then the first meeting after we say, well, did we really mean just the upper levels? And, so Matt, and then
Bob was
Bob.
first.
Okay,
I'm
Bob.
just gonna say, if you can hear me, that we have a setback at the bottom of the property from the property line, that if you're there and the rest of them step back from that point, I think it's gonna work. Seems to me, you're not building right at the street.
If I recall, I mean, the intent was we talked at first about prohibiting 4 and 5-story buildings. And I think the intent of this was to say, we don't want to prohibit that, but we do want it to respect the hillside and the topography, and those levels should be stepped back. So if there's a better way to state that.
Matt.
I think, so just to be clear, Mark, you're proposing to take the word these and put in the upper,
These upper,
or these upper.
or those, I don't know, it was just a
The
suggestion.
upper line.
I don't see an issue with that, just from what I'm reading here.
I'm kind of on that. To me, familiarity with some of these lots being rather deep cuts at the property line and Hark's purview and trying to break up massing and whether to how literal or specific to be and per each level has to. I would make the argument that one of the negative reactions we had to this cruise ship or this terracing, everything being, similarly stepped back might not be a desirable outcome to consider. I think there are ways to encourage breaking up a massing on steep hillsides that might not be that it steps at every level. Is, I guess, a thing I'd ask you guys to contemplate with that.
You're sort of saying that there's instances where you might want a two-story element. and-
Correct.
Yeah.
I think there are,
I don't know if this precludes.
I'd be
that.
concerned about one-story elements everywhere, frankly.
This still could allow it.
Yeah, because it's talking about 3 or more stories. So if you're above 2 stories, essentially is the way I'm reading it.
Well,
I was, sorry for making this more complicated than maybe it needs to be, but the way I read that sentence is if 3 are proposed, these, meaning all 3 of these, should be set back substantially from the street. And I don't think that's what we're trying to necessarily say. We're just trying to say they should step back from the first level. I don't know.
why not the word upper? Is that too simple?
Hey, John, did you say at the beginning too, that this, in your introduction, this overlay these standards on steep hill lots, you want to have this all with a bow on it at the same time, the land use code?
Yes.
Okay. All right. Okay.
So Stacy's language might be good about first level, or we could insert the word, my suggestion is the upper, but I'm open to any suggestion, even if it seems redundant, Bob, to your comment. I'd rather be over communicative. So there's no question when all of us are gone from the board that they remember what we meant.
You could say levels above the second level, which deals with Peter's issue.
Or above the first level.
Whatever you want, levels above the X level.
It could say if 2 or more stories are proposed above the first level, these levels should be set back substantially from the street.
Yep.
Is that more?
Yeah.
Yep.
I think there are going to be more houses built in the not so distant future along Tomboy Road, which means they're going down from Tomboy Road, and Mountain Avenue either doesn't exist or is really imaginary. We have a little bit of that out in East Telluride already, where the road is sometimes above the house, so maybe it should be at the lower lot line, because we don't always have streets at the lower lot line.
Mhm.
And, maybe someone standing at a street, another half a block or block down looking up, but just define it lower lot line.
Good point. Street or property line.
So John, you want to take a second and then try a revision on us?
No, she wants you to do it.
Oh, you want us to do it?
Or,
You do it. Yeah, you have to do it, Mark.
well,
The problem is not the one to solve it, so.
Okay,
Go for it.
Stacy. I like your language.
2 or more stories.
I would say 3 or more stories are proposed. The upper levels should be set back substantially from the street or lower property or property.
I like that.
Yeah.
That's good.
Lower property line.
Is it bad form to encourage work sessions in hillside, very visible lots in general as well? Could you add that? Because to this, I think seeing these things as a board when it's a little less or a little earlier, you would have more ability to shape what an outcome
Have a
might be.
discussion about it, yeah.
Yep. I'm just
Yeah.
curious about floating the idea of encouraging the visibility of these properties. It's in line with your earlier amendment to regardless of floor area, that they
Yes.
go to the full board. And I think the outcomes, if you're stepping every level, you're gonna not be happy. There's gonna be like things you're like, no. Yeah.
Well, I think we always encourage work sessions, but if we didn't even have these tools to work with and we've sent away the cascading structures that everybody's got excited about when we started this, and now we're going to have these tools, and if we can agree to this last language, and thanks Kathy for your input, Is our board okay with this language?
I am.
Okay, straw poll. Okay. And that's the only question.
Mark, I wanted to go back, John, a couple, when landscaping was mentioned. I've been mulling over and trying to ask a little bit more about what I understand native. I don't understand as a landscape architect what rough and subdued landscaping is. So I was just going to ask you, Mark, about at what point you are with this. I know that's probably original language, but I think that needs a little work. And I'm not necessarily prepared yet to suggest what that might
Well,
be.
Good point. We thought we knew what we meant because we've had several come in that had all this greenery and, let's say, unnatural and not rough, and what was the other one?
Subdued.
Dude. So Jonna knows, I mean, what it is. We think
Yeah.
we know what it is, but I don't have another adjective to add, but
Right.
welcome for any input.
So perhaps just a definition on, in terms of what you're intending. Subdued to me, if I was to interpret it, would be, well, not a lot of blooming
Right.
stuff. On the other hand, one of the things that we rely on heavily here are perennials that bloom.
Yeah.
Because they survive. And they come back every year and they can handle the snowpack and all of that. So are you talking about not a lot of, lilacs, for instance, that bloom, but are also bright green? Or do you mean no peonies, or in other words, subdued is a little general, and I'm not trying to define that today. I'm just saying that that's rough to me would mean not sheared, not pruned, not topiary. But someone
Angela-
else might actually.
Angela, right
contribute.
above this, there's a great sentence, use plant, which I think is very clear. Use
Right,
plant materials
native.
that are native and blend with the hillside, well, blend with
Right.
the hillside,
Right.
Why don't we just, I mean, it seems like the last sentence is just kind of redundant. If we stick to use plant materials that are native and blend with the hillside, then everybody knows what we're talking about.
I would hope so. Now,
I would
you were-
agree with striking that last sentence, but what if we put natural in front of hillside, blended with the natural hillside?
Yes. I'm fine with that. Natural means the
Idea.
pre-existing
Yeah.
hillside.
I mean, I could add other things like resilient, sustainable, etc. But that'll come with the climate action plan more than likely.
Yeah, that's a different goal.
I don't mind bright flower baskets.
This sentence has always kind of befuddled me, so as long as we're talking about it, this section, I
So-
thought it.
So, good point. So
Exactly.
to the purpose of the motion, use plant materials that are native with the hillside, period.
No,
Native
just
and
say
blend with the
native
natural
and
hillside.
blend with the hillside.
And then get rid of
Oh.
the second sentence. or
Just
third
the sentence.
Oh, okay. Got it. That's easy straight.
And I
This
think
is
this is
the one-
repeated elsewhere in the code somewhere. I'm not sure.
Other treatment areas.
Right.
Hillside treatment areas, which.
John, I can't hear you.
Yes.
I mean, I'm not lobbying to keep that last sentence in, but I think the redundancy of it helped us differentiate this beautiful green lawn down here with all these flowers below the hillside, and that hillside by those words, rough, natural, and subdued. But I'm okay if native and blend with the hillside is good enough.
I did like Matt's natural hillside.
Oh, that's right.
I think it's whatever. Either one is fine.
Natural. Native and blend with the natural hillside? Okay. Are we unanimous?
Yeah.
Couple, okay. Thank you for,
And I'm sure Jonna will find any other locations where this needs to be corrected. Or
Or
Aaron.
clarified, yeah.
It's the next
Yeah.
project. Yeah. So, this is the end of my presentation. I have made the notes in the draft, that I have. If you want to move, or you have discussion and public comment. I
Discussion,
have
public comment,
A
and then-
slide with the proposed motion. You can make that with the amendments as discussed in the meeting.
Okay.
if you'd like.
I think several of us have notes on it and we'll get it right. But if we should hear from the public before deliberating, so please come on up and state your name, and we encourage you to spend 3 minutes or less because we want to give everybody a chance to speak. Come on up.
Dave?
Where do I go? I'm up here.
Right.
Okay, I'm Dave Peterson. And, let's see, all these drawings seem to deal with a driveway from below. And I've got a house up on Townway. And I've got another lot up on Townway. So I'm kind of looking at it from the top down. And so, well, just one thing that kind of struck me was, let me find the page here. The double basements. And you show a car down the bottom, but I've got cars up on top.
Mhm.
And so you say the post-construction grade low point. How about if that that's the low point of the floor? Is that what that is?
Site coverage.
For site coverage?
Sorry, I don't know what.
What is that for?
Maybe John can
Donna,
address.
can you bring us back to that
It's the
slide?
post-construction grade low point of the site coverage of
Okay,
the
s-
foundation or footprint of the building.
So that's on the outside. Is that setting the lowest? Well, I'd like to put a floor. It makes sense to me to put floors like 4 foot below that post-construction grade, hitting the outside wall so that you've got a sill. And then you drop 6 inches for the concrete outside.
It's a level, so you can do that.
Yeah,
That's fine.
that's not
You
precluded.
can't build a livable level below that point.
Okay, so
And
that bottom floor can fluctuate. It can go down
Yes.
4 feet. say,
As long
Yes.
as it's not
3
living space. Yeah.
living, yeah.
And Dave, I did mention that I would add an illustration with the car at the top.
Yeah. But you really need to,
What do you drive?
well,
What kind of car do you drive?
it's a white one,
We'll try to.
but
Clarify.
anyway, I mean, it's so different designing from the car up in the attic versus the car down the
Yeah.
basement.
Right.
Good points.
Thanks for the.
But you're not precluded. Thanks. Other public, please come on up.
George Proctor, just really 2 points of clarification more than anything. So what I understood is that we're talking about like we're building for homes a setback from the property line or the street. Like so in case that you overlook the project, I'd be involved with the setback that's planned is 5 feet from the property line. So that 5 feet from the property line, that's where the structure can start. It can be a single story or, as Peter was suggesting, more than that. So that was one thing I want to make sure that kind of was redefined in this. And the second thing is just a quick comment. Please don't insist on an extra work session. I don't think you have time for it. And all the people want to do it. If we don't need work session, please.
Okay, thank you. Other comments? Is there anybody electronically raising their hand? I don't see a hand. Piper?
Can I just ask a question, or does this have?
Well, you can make a comment
You need to come to the podium though, because it's recorded.
Okay, well,
and then we'll comment back to you.
okay. So anyway, the houses up on Tomway are sometimes closer than 5 feet. Because sometimes the property line slides down a hill about 5 or 6 feet. You got the edge of the traveled way. Tomway is just a little road. So then we've got a little bump and then you go down the hill about 5 or 6 feet and that's the top property line. So to kick that setback even further down the hill means that you want to slide the house downhill. So it would be nice. I guess what I'd like to do is just have an average of like you usually do. You have an average of the other houses and you start from that basis. And so, and sometimes that's less than 5 feet. So I don't know how you've written this exactly, how it's gotta be 5 foot minimum. And then you start, because I'm already downhill with my north property line.
I'm happy to answer or address that.
Make a comment.
Thanks.
This will not affect your setbacks. This is not intended to change anyone's setbacks.
Setbacks is normal.
Setbacks is normal.
Thank you. I think we're finished. Any other comments, deliberation on the board? Appreciate all your comments and hard work and examples that you brought to meetings. Thank you. So I think we're ready to make a motion. Before the motion, I guess I would just close with saying thank you for P&Z's input. There were 3 or 4 things that you helped clarify. And I hope you, as Eleni said, we brought maybe some new information with means, methods, deal with drainage, and the 4 that were emphasized here were the strategies to deal with hydrostatic pressure behind the wall, and then of course the gravel, which is taking it up above before it even gets to the dry wells, and then the dry wells, and then Chris's comment on the safety of the heated egress wells. I hope that satisfied you, and I appreciate everybody relating their experience, because this is what they do every day. So, okay, enough said. I think we're ready for a motion.
Guess I'm gonna do it. Okay. I move to recommend to the Planning and Zoning Commission approval of an ordinance of the Town Council of the Town of Telluride, Colorado, amending the Telluride Land Use Code of the Telluride Municipal Code at Chapter 18, Land Use Code, within Article 3, Division 1, General, Article 3, Division 2, Zone District Purposes and Standards, Article 7, Division 1, Historic Preservation Overlay District, and Article 7, Division 2, alterations, additions, and erection, and amending the design guidelines and standards for building in Telluride, January 2016 edition with amendments as noted during the meeting. Is that sufficient? That'll work. Okay.
Matt will second.
I'm sorry, I was making notes. Did we do the landscaping?
Yeah. I just said as amended during the discussion.
Oh, as amended per her language. Okay, so we don't have to repeat it.
Right.
Okay.
Good.
Well, then, make it easy. Let's vote.
Bob, yes.
Matt, yes.
Kiernan, yes.
Stacy, yes.
Mark, yes. It's off to you,
Okay.
Eleni, and your team.
Do you wanna?
Okay, are we doing this motion now? Do you do both of them? Okay, fine.
Are you
Um,
ready to adjourn?
No, the question is,
Wait,
does
stick
P
around.
and Z want to have, wait, guys.
Oh, no.
Does
Hang
P
on.
and Z want
No.
to have further discussion? Do I hear anybody from P and Z who wants to discuss this further? Or are we
No.
ready for, okay,
No,
great.
I just want to thank everyone who contributed to us understanding hydrostatic pressure, drainage, et cetera, and that you consider that as you review these projects as well, because they're of concern to all of us.
And I want to thank everyone on Hark and Peter who crossed the line and went back to Hark for working so hard at the last meeting and going through so many scenarios and trying to, it seems like you really invested your hearts and your brains in it, and I appreciate that a lot.
We have some other work awaiting us.
Yeah.
Does anybody else on P and Z have any comments at this time before we go to a motion?
I have one comment. I was just wondering, just listening to the conversation around the water and the subsurface water concerns and how we don't have the data. Is it of interest to start getting that 5 years after recording of new structures? Is that is that too much of a hassle? Or is it something that we should start collecting?
Are you asking me?
You talked to the hydrologist.
Yeah.
I think if we think it's a real issue, then yeah, we're potentially talking about changing people's property values, and we
Mm.
shouldn't do that without data.
Mm.
So if it's a big enough issue, and it seems like it, because we're discussing it, and we've discussed it a number of 9, for 9 weeks, then I know on our projects that are closer to the San Miguel River, that data's already been begun. I think the missing piece is requiring that the data is collected after, so that there's a before and an after picture. I can't say whether.
I think this is sort of the purview of the building department and public works. I think if there's
Town
a
manager.
concern that we should ask staff to have that conversation with those departments. And if they feel like there's a concern, then I think they can take the proper steps to get the data, hire the engineers, whatever needs to happen.
Mhm.
Well,
Just like
that's,
we
that's
have-
my question. Who collects the data? Who would be the right person to collect it? Sounds like the building department.
Lenny, this is Todd, and I think
Yes, Todd.
Matt's got it right.
Mhm.
We've got to give this to the professionals. There is undoubtedly a baseline situation study that needs to be done before we can say we need to collect flow on the 18th of January, 5 feet below the surface of your downstairs, downstream window well. I mean, we don't have any of that background to start with. So it's going to have to end up being in the town budget someplace. And then we can pick it up.
Well, we can recommend to town council that they allocate money to start studying the hydrology on these lots, or whatever, however the language should be, that this study begin. Is that something we want to do?
I would say that that is a great way to start. Matt, you're right. The professionals who hire either who are a staff who can do that, or hire consultants, much like we have done for rockfall hazards and avalanche hazards, that we begin to look at this. We live on alluvial fan. They are by nature moving, as the cemetery has found out with the bodies moving down the hill. Over time, we are arresting that basically with the basements supposedly, but I think for our peace of mind and future and cumulative effects, that would be a really smart thing to recommend. So thank Lachey for not dropping that. Appreciate that.
Do we want to add that in somehow here, or should we take that up separately?
Ron is here to comment on that, Lenny.
Ron, thank you.
So I think it's more of a policy question. If that's something that we want to advance, then we can do that.
Yeah.
I'm not sure that it necessarily needs to be a part of this recommendation.
Okay, fine.
Exactly.
Right. Separate.
Are there other comments from P and Z, or are we ready for a motion? Please wave your hand wildly if you want to comment. Yes, Todd,
No, I will make the motion.
fine.
I move to recommend to town council approval of an ordinance of the town council of the town of Telluride, Colorado, amending the Telluride Land Use Code of the Telluride Municipal Code at Chapter 18 Land Use Code within Article 3, Division 1, General, Article 3, Division 2, Zone District Purposes and Standards, Article 7, Division 1, Historic Preservation Overlay District, and Article 7, Division 2, Alteration, Addition, and Erection, and amending the design guidelines and standards for building in Telluride, January 2016 edition, with amendments as proposed during tonight's meeting.
Do we have a second? Speak up.
Kathy can.
I
Kathy
did.
did.
Kathy seconds. Is there any further discussion of the motion? All right, seeing none, we will proceed to vote. Please state your name and your vote. Start with Kathy.
Kathy, yes.
Angela, yes.
Todd, yes.
Where's Charles?
I don't know. So
He was-
He's muted.
He's muted.
Could somebody unmute Charles so we can vote?
I think you gave it thumbs up.
All right. Charles, yes.
There we go.
And Eleni, yes. All right. The motion is passed.
Thank you all
Mark-
very much.
So
for your
I'm gonna
work.
move to adjourn.
Okay,
The Hart portion of the meeting at 10 till 7. And thank you again, staff, and particularly for all your work, and our board. Thanks for your support, and onward.
Good to see you
all right,
guys.
thank
Thanks
you.
for coming.
Hope you don't miss us.
You guys showed up and.
Have another group meeting one of these days, one of these months, yeah. Covered from this work. It's all the time.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You guys can come up to
Yeah.
the table. Bring your name tags.
I'm sitting in the real chairs.
Bring your names with you.
Yeah. Don't be nameless.
I understand.
Ron's playing musical chairs.
Yeah.
I have to play him some music.
All right, while we're doing this, can I start reading this, the long title of the second thing?
Please.
Yes, okay. All right, so land use code amendments, summary. 1, a review and recommendation from the Planning and Zoning Commission to Town Council regarding amendments to land use code, Article 3, Division 2, zone district purposes and standards. And Article 6, Division 4, subdivisions for the purpose of establishing limits on the consolidation and aggregation of lots for 1 and 2 family dwelling units. And our staff member is Ron. Ron.
Thank you, Chair Laney. Constantine and Planning Commission members, let me share my screen. So this is the code amendment, land use code amendment that you've seen before. Basically to modify or amend the land use code to incorporate the language of ballot 300 as closely as we can, meet the intent of the ballot measure that was approved by the voters in 2015. So just to remind you the language again, the intent of the ballot measure was to not allow the vacation of lot lines in order to combine 2 or more land use compliant lots into a single lot. And there were exceptions. The exceptions included commercial development, or in cases where buildings straddled lot lines for housekeeping. And then there was a provision that allowed for Historic Architectural Review Commission and the Planning and Zoning Commission to consider a lot line vacation and vote by an extraordinary majority with a demonstrated exceptional public benefit from the applicant. And then finally, it exempted the Hillside Developing 2 zoning district. So we looked at some of the issues involved with the ballot measure or the basis for the ballot measure. And they included things like larger lot sizes that would provide for homes out of scale with the community, larger homes that were empty for a majority of the year, the loss of affordable housing, and then smaller or demolition of smaller homes that were lost and replaced with larger homes. So we looked at the land use code as far as some of the possible revisions that could be made. And essentially, lot line vacations, or the consolidation of lots was the remaining issue that we thought we should address with this land use code amendment. And we would look at these other issues as far as the replacement size of buildings after demolitions occur, maximum lot sizes, limits on the size of additions. We would look at that in future, or when we have future data, and probably more likely when we address the comprehensive plan. The language that we ended up with, we're adding a note to the hillside transitional historic residential accommodations 1 and the residential commercial zones. The lot will refer to a section in our subdivision standards under section 6-408W. And let me read the language. So 6-408W, essentially what we're trying to do is accomplish the intent of the ballot measure. Prohibition of certain lot line vacations within the hillside transitional, residential, historic residential, accommodations 1, or residential commercial zone districts. A lot that contains 1 or 2 family dwelling, a 1 or 2 family dwelling unit may only be consolidated or aggregated with 1 or more adjoining lots. Or 2 or more vacant lots may only be consolidated or aggregated to eliminate non-conforming lots as per Article 4. In other words, buildings that extend across lot lines, for example, or to eliminate pre-existing building encroachments across lot lines, including open decks, porches, roof eaves, and stoops, or by means of a PUD. The intent of the PUD is to accomplish what was originally identified as the extraordinary majority and public benefit associated with approval through the old process. There was other language that we did have in original meeting or earlier meetings, and I'll read it for you for your recollection. However, unless approved through the PUD process, no consolidation or aggregation of lots may occur if 1 or more lot lines may be adjusted or repositioned to eliminate building encroachments or other nonconformities without resulting in any other nonconformities. So at the town council meeting on July 11, town council recommended that staff remove that section. The concern was the administration of that section. How do we interpret it? How will we accomplish and how will applicants accomplish this section? So the final language does not include that second paragraph. And that was considered at our last HARC meeting as well, without that language. So the benefits of the codification: preserves the ballot 300 as currently applied. It provides clarity and specifically limits is limited to zoning where 1 and 2 family residences are permitted. Removes its application to mixed use developments in commercial zones. And it replaces HARC and P&Z extraordinary majority and exceptional public benefit with the PUD process. So at the July 19 HARC meeting, HARC considered the changes as included in your staff memo and unanimously supported the changes as indicated. And with that concludes my presentation, unless you have any questions.
Well, I have some questions. Can you stop sharing your screen, Ron, so I can see everybody?
Okay. Let me go back.
However you do that. So I have a couple questions. I understand town council's concern, at least I think I do, about this second paragraph. However, isn't the answer that what we would really like to do, so this gives applicants a choice. They can either try to see if they can work out something to adjust the lot line, or they can go through the PUD process, in which case we have a process, they'll be heard, they have to provide a public benefit. But we reduce we encourage people by providing them this other avenue to not use the PUD process. And just get it done themselves.
Yeah, and I think the concern of town council was that how do we demonstrate situations where a lot line adjustment might cure the problem? And I think they felt like, or my interpretation of their discussion was that they thought that that was something that was too onerous to require of applicants, and that it may be a little bit of a difficulty for staff to administer. So again, it's not, the issue is if you can accomplish a property line or a lot line adjustment without the need to go through the PUD process, then that's an option. But the other issue is if it isn't an option and they can't demonstrate that a lot line adjustment would cure it, how do we administer that? It's kind of a difficult question to answer.
Lenny, if I may.
Yes, Todd, I'm sorry, I can't see you. Wave your hand. Yes,
I
go
sort of
ahead.
had the same question, and we had a recent situation where we could adjust a line which is not aggregating and it's not consolidating.
Yeah.
It just adjusts it. Does this prohibit adjustment?
No,
Okay.
no, not at all. Now, in the
No, it just
situation.
says it's incentivize people to adjust or to use a PUD. You're limited.
And it's not really an incentive. It's, I think the way we've written it is if you can accomplish a lot line adjustment and cure the issue as far as building encroachments or nonconformities, then you have to go through that process.
No, or it says, or you can use the PUD.
Which means you have to provide a public benefit at the same time.
Correct. So we're reducing the number of people who can just say, oh, my building's roof is 3 inches in the other lot. Therefore I can consolidate. Right? I can't see you guys. So wave your hand, or don't wave your hand, speak up.
Without this additional language, you're correct.
They would use it as an excuse to do the PUD.
No.
To remedy something would be very simple.
No, it would be, they would have to demonstrate, well, if we did end up with this language, somehow in our application process, we'd have to require that every applicant demonstrate that they've explored the idea of a lot line vacation, a lot line adjustment, and that they can't accomplish it. And then they would have to identify why they can't accomplish it.
And council didn't get that?
No, I think they did. It's just that it's an administrative challenge.
Well, I think that this was something that we spent a lot of time talking about how especially encroachment of roof eaves and stoops, it's like, we're getting to a point where a tiny encroachment means consolidation of 2 lots. And we were hoping to reduce the number of times that happened. I mean, does anybody else, would anybody else on P&Z like to comment about this?
Yeah, this
Just
is
speak up.
Todd. I think you're right, that we were hoping that by however we craft the language here, that we say, no, you can't, just because you got a 3-inch overhang, you
Mhm.
can't consolidate those two lots.
Yeah.
But this seems to read that that is one of the two reasons why you can.
Yeah, I mean, I don't think, I think this board, and we can, I want to hear from all members of the board about this. I think this board would like to recommend that language, and if town council doesn't like it, that's their prerogative, but we think that language is important. I think that language is important for the reasons that we've just stated. Others,
Mhm.
I'd love to hear from other members. Just speak up. I can't see you.
Perhaps it needs to be reworded slightly to present it a little more.
Positively. rather-
Yeah, yeah, that we're really trying to help people do a little less hassle and also not use it as an excuse, which I'm not sure how to say that, except maybe to eliminate, however, unless approved through the PUD process, just say consolidation and aggregation of lots may not occur under a PUD to just accomplish adjustment and reposition to eliminate the building encroachment, something like that.
Maybe we should say something about the building encroachment. I mean, maybe an answer would be, or to eliminate significant pre-existing building encroachments. So we have what we mean is half the house is on the other lot. Now, we will have a problem with what is significant, but I'm really bothered by this open decks, porches, roof eaves, and stoops stuff. It's really suggests to me of making it easier.
Well, and again, and Ron, you said this, what we hope that they will do is ask for an adjustment rather than a consolidation.
And the challenge for staff is if they don't ask for a lot line adjustment, I think our challenge is to determine whether it is something that they could have accomplished. So that's challenging.
It puts you in a tough spot.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. How do you feel about something about the amount of building encroachment has to be more significant and not including open decks, porches, roof eaves, and stoops? I'm asking you, Ron. Would that be hard to administer?
Well, I think the reason we put that in there is because we had an issue with a current ballot language trying to determine what a building straddling a lot line really meant. So I think we're just trying to clarify that it includes, and this is how we interpreted ballot 300 before, that if it included any deck, porch, roof eave, or stoop, then we determined it to be straddling a lot line. That's why we put it in there for clarification. But if you disagree.
So decks, porches, that sort of thing are ancillary to the building.
Correct.
It's a way to define that they are not of a significant nature, that they can be removed in some cases or
Right.
redesigned. I don't know.
Well, and then if your roof is the part that's the encroaching on the building line, it doesn't really give you the right to join the two lots together and build a huge house.
Kathy has a comment.
Yes, Kathy.
You have to remember that we still have a lot of historic structures in some of these residential, commercial, and the residential and historic residential zones, and we don't want to chop off
Right, porches and decks.
porches and decks. So I think we do want to encourage a PUD, but certainly a PUD is not easy for the staff. It's not a low number of hours of staff time needed.
For the applicant.
Yeah, same for the applicant, but I mean, if town council's trying to get rid of the second paragraph to relieve tension on staff, the, the PUD is taking more staff time. Maybe maybe we're collecting enough fees to justify it. I'm not sure of that. But I have problems with I want the first paragraph as it's written, for sure. I do think if there's an easy consolidation that does not create any nonconformities, that should be pursued, or the PUD that they ask for instead should be super strong, have more public benefits.
You said consolidation. Did you mean adjustment?
I meant it's all adjustment. I want to, yeah, I think adjustment should be the first consideration if it does not create new non-conforming lots. And then, then the next step, if they want to do something bigger, then they might have to do a PUD and bring in some real public benefit with them.
Well, that is exactly what we tried to capture in the second paragraph. What you just said, Kathy, is it's exactly how I read that second paragraph. No consolidation or aggregations of lots may occur. In other words, you can't join your two lots up if you can do a minor adjustment and not get any nonconformities. Or if that doesn't work for you, if you're trying to consolidate and you could adjust, but you don't want to, you can go to the PUD process.
Well, I think we need to reword this, and I'm a little confused about whether town council wanted to be more developer friendly or whether town council was worried about the amount of administrative work they were creating for their staff. And I don't know if Dan has comments or if we.
Yeah, we might really not know because, it's they might all have different reasons.
Yeah.
I mean, my understanding of the sentiment of council was that this was not trying to make any major adjustments to how we currently implement question 300, but simply solidify its legal founding in our land use code is my interpretation of the direction of council.
Okay, and what about this second paragraph that's being eliminated? What is your take, or what do you, why did council want to get rid of this? Because it presents the easiest way for an owner to move forward by just asking to move a lot line over, let's say 5 feet, and the lot's extra wide, and that's no big deal.
Take attempt at answering this is Peter. So the way staff has interpreted 300 or approached it, if you have a housekeeping, if there's a porch or a stoop or a building over a lot line, you have the ability to vacate that. And I think, not to answer for you there, Dan, but that would be a change if that paragraph were included. And to points everyone's sort of voicing concerns about, and again, I will just add to this too, that I think one concern I think I brought up with that second paragraph, or versions of what could be redrawn, rather messy. I'm become a vocal over time about trying to clean up things that are screwed up with property. And you look at a town map and there are screwball lot configurations that made sense in the moment, and you're just like, this is never going to get fixed. And it's a bad thing for a town in general. There's a lot of historic structures. There's a lot of oddball tweaks, things that are askew. There could be a lot of damage done to property boundaries with good intentions. And I think that's not a goal I'd be supportive of, but I do hear a lot of interest in trying to create other ways to not end up with aggregated lots. Sorry.
It's actually a consequence of the many reviews we've had since this was passed, and the situations that have come up that are more gray than what was intended to be a fairly clear language in the ballot. As far as I could tell, that this kind of situation, wiggle room, whatever, was not necessarily understood. But Dan?
Just to add on it too, and to add on to Peter's comments, I think part of the reasoning behind eliminating that paragraph is prioritizing smaller lots and smaller building sizes and accepting that the trade-off with that might be some not otherwise non-conforming lots and prioritizing that element of ballot question.
I'm sorry, Dan, I didn't understand what you just said. Why is, how does eliminating this prioritize smaller lots?
It encourages bigger lots.
Yeah,
But this does.
Maybe I've misinterpreted those comments, and I certainly, of course, always happy to hear your expertise in planning and zoning's opinion on it.
I mean, in some ways, Dan is correct because it would preserve the lots. It would just adjust the interior lot line. So you'd preserve the
oh,
small.
perhaps I got Dan backwards. Dan, were you saying that having this second paragraph preserves smaller lots?
No, I was saying eliminating this paragraph helps preserve smaller lots.
Okay, that I don't get.
Okay. That is my recollection of it. Again, we're several weeks out now. I don't have my notes in front of me, but so I'm going off of.
Okay.
and then-
Can we address this problem, Ron, in some way that you think will not be a burden, too much extra burden to staff? I mean, how does staff feel about this, the PUD process versus this and this language and so on? I mean, it seems as though we were really trying to reduce the number of lots that were combined on where it wasn't necessary and where without resulting in nonconformity. So we're trying to address Peter's concern, which I think is quite reasonable. And that's where this second paragraph came from. Now, if the language needs to be revised, fine. But I think the goals that are set out in this paragraph are goals that we really did want to advance. And what do other people think? I've heard from Todd a little bit. I've heard from Kathy, Angela.
Well, I'm trying to wordsmith this a little bit to see if there's any way we can use the intended language here in a clearer way. Essentially, we're saying aggregation of lots. If one or more lot lines can be repositioned or adjustment of lot lines are preferable.
Yes. And
Well,
maybe that's all we can say is that, it's preferred to do that. Wait, Ron, you were saying something?
We have a public comment too.
Okay, well, right now we're doing, this is more, I guess. We should
So-
probably have public comment before we go further, but I started out with a question to Ron and then we went right into discussion. This is my bad. Are there any other questions for Ron? Let's start with that. And please just speak up. I can't see you.
I don't have a question, Lenny, but like a comment, just observation. I don't know if it's accurate or what everybody else's perception is, but I will say that the number of work sessions we've gone through and the various items that were offered up for discussion and handled rather quickly. I feel like in the last month, there has been a fair amount of consolidation. And there's the winnowing of what we're amending here. And this is a tricky one. And it's sort of like, okay, we're going to end up with really challenging oddball lots, but for the public benefits we're interested in, it's a challenging one. And I put this in a category by myself, not for staff, others opinion as well. But it feels like we're aiming for September. And these are things we can do. And we have identified paths forward with those. And that's not expanding additionally, but these trickier sort of aspects are in the balance.
Right. So what if we said, just as a suggestion, aggregation, let's see, adjustment of lots, lot lines, one or more lot lines are preferable for repositioning to eliminate building encroachments over consolidation or aggregation of lots. No,
From
preferred is a
staff's-
tough term, right? Yeah.
Yeah, preferable, I'm not sure I mean, the intent is that and I don't think you'll end up with oddball lots because you'd still have to be conforming. So you'd have to have a
Right.
20-foot width. So you're not going to have a flag lot, for example,
Right.
if it's less than 25 feet. And there's probably not too many that are out there where this would actually happen. But the intent is that if you can accomplish a minor adjustment, get rid of the building encroachments, get rid of any nonconformities, then you can't do a lot line vacation.
Correct.
Right.
That's
the
correct.
intent.
That is the intent of this language.
So remove preferable and say, must occur before consolidation or aggregation of lots.
Okay, or if. Something.
What Ron just says pretty good. If consolidation or if one or more lot lines may be adjusted or repositioned to eliminate, you sort of start in the middle of our sentence. We start with the if
Right.
word,
Right.
and then you go to the end. Then no consolidation or aggregation of lots should occur unless approved for the PUD process. We're just rearranging the sentence, but maybe it's clearer and more more obvious where we're going.
Right, and it's right now we say you cannot
Yep.
unless you are one, eliminating non-conforming lots,
Mm-hmm.
which I think we agree with,
Mm-hmm.
or by means of a PUD, which we agree
Mhm.
with. And then the piece that says to eliminate pre-existing building encroachments across lot lines, including open decks, that
Yeah,
whole
we have to leave
piece,
that in. Mhm.
that needs to come out of that sentence. And because we do not want consolidation or aggregation or vacating of lot lines just because of these encroachments.
Well, but if there is an encroachment, if there is a building that extends across a lot line or a stoop or whatever, and you can't accomplish a lot line adjustment, then this allows, and this is the way
Yeah, no, then the
allows you
original
to do
300
the
does
lot
say-
line vacation.
Yeah, no, the original 300 does say, and I think it envisioned like the lot line running down the middle of the house. That if the lot straddles, I think is the word in 300, the lot line. And that sounds to me like the house has 1 foot on either side of the lot line, it's a significant encroachment. So that's why I think this language is not so bad. Todd's point is good. This is why I would put in significant or to eliminate significant pre-existing building encroachments. And then you get to the next one and you say, oh, but if it's just a matter of adjusting the lot line a little bit, then you can't do it then that doesn't count.
Or Eleni and
Yes,
everybody
Todd.
else, is it just the decks, porches, roof eaves and stoops that we're concerned about? I mean, if the building footprint straddles the lot line,
That's pretty clear cut.
Yeah,
then
that's pretty clear cut. Yes.
that's
I agree.
okay. But it's these, to your term, non-significant, Eleni, or minor or appurtenances. We don't want 2 lots combined just because there is a porch that goes over the lot line.
Yeah, especially if
we-
somebody just recently built that porch.
Well, or it's an old one. We've seen
Yeah, that's true.
several applications in the last 10 years.
It's historic to cat.
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
It's historic is
Yeah.
totally different if it's
Yeah.
in 1980.
Eleni, we have a public here that would like to speak at some
Okay,
point.
let's hear from the public and then we'll go back to wordsmithing a bit probably. Okay, but whoever the public is, Ron or Piper, can you put the meeting room up on the screen rather than Ron's language? Thank you. All right, please come up to the podium.
He's there.
Is there?
Okay, great.
Tom,
I can't
Tom
see him.
Kennedy is here.
Great. Hi, Tom.
Hi.
I'm sorry, I can't see you. Please speak.
Thought I'd stick around after the last one. And I really hadn't planned on. I just wanted to listen, but I think Kathy makes a good point. You need to be mindful of this story. It's not always straight up and down. Sometimes it's back and forth. We all dealt with this one over here, Columbia Aspen.
Or maybe it's a
multiple
jog.
Years where you have to come up and back and stuff. So, so whatever you do, you probably want to think of a carve out for historic, however you're thinking about this. And if you are looking at coming up with criteria, it's really important that it's clear. So what's a non-conforming? So if you had, let's say it is a vertical one, where you had a house and maybe 2 feet is encroaching into the side. Does that mean you have to draw a big arc in a lot? Because you could technically make it. So I think you need to be real clear. And I think you probably have some standards in your subdivision about drawing lot lines and things like that. But I think it's going to be important for whoever may be coming in and buying one of these things. What do I do? What can I do? What do I need to do? What can I do? And then you're going to be flooded with work sessions. Can I do this? Can I not do that? And how do you, so whatever you're doing, you need to be clear about question 300. It sort of became clear by practice because we kind of knew what it meant. And I think the idea of putting it, codifying it is a great one. I don't think the intention of, well, let's try to push people into a PUD. I don't think that's the right goal here. This is supposed to be a subdivision, kind of clean up thing. And so I was comfortable without the language, but if you want to put the language in, you got a lot of carve outs and additional work you need to do. It needs to be real clear what constitutes a conforming lot. What do you have to do in order to then avoid the consolidation? So it's very clear, so somebody knows what exactly they can and can't do, as opposed to having to, submit an application and sit here and, and have a debate on each of the lots. So that'd be my, and again, as Kathy said, you gotta think of historic structures because you've got these spread out, and those are probably one of the bigger reasons for why we're even looking at doing these consolidations.
Is there any more public comment? Thank you, Tom. I can't see.
Kathy has her
I
hand
have
up.
my hand up.
Sorry, Kathy.
I'm wondering, and I don't think Ron was gonna know this on the top of his head, but you'd really almost need more than 2 lots. I mean, think of a 2-lot parcel that has, whether it has a porch or whether it has 5 feet of the house from the 80s or the house from 1910 crossing the lot line. That's only a 50-foot wide lot by 100 to 125-foot deep lot. You can't make 2 conforming lots out of it, but with the houses even, 1 foot across the lot line. And you can maybe draw it the other way, but we usually don't want to have the liberty of roads on both sides and we're making flag lots and stuff. So how many 3-lot parcels do we have where they can be combined and make it super huge? And so I think maybe we're chasing after something that's, like 2 instances or something.
I don't disagree with you, Kathy, except we're seeing money that we never could have conceived of before, and they'll buy all 3 and try and vacate it.
Right, but we don't have to put the 3rd lot in, but I mean, the majority of what we're gonna have happen if without the 2nd paragraph. And even with the 2nd paragraph is gonna be 2 lots getting combined. If they've already been split into 50 by 60, the square lots that we have in some sections of town from long ago rezonings, or if they're 25s by whatever the 3 depths they are, you can't do much to make 2 conforming lots with a building on it, especially a historic building. And we don't necessarily want every 70s or even every 40s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, 90s building turned
into a massive.
Built, unbuilt and thrown away because that's a lot of waste of resources and impact on sustainability. So I think we should just go with the 1st paragraph. Let's monitor it for a year. If we have a rush of applications, we guessed wrong. If we have no applications in that time, we're probably on the right track. And you know, to
Well,
me,
here's a question that might help us. Do we have any idea, this is a question for Ron, do we have any idea how many parcels there are where the building encroaches, one building encroaches on another lot line?
Bunch.
Yeah,
lot.
I would
a
think a lot.
lot. We've accomplished a lot of them lot line adjustments for that very reason, or the lot line vacations for that very reason, but the harder question is how many of those exist that you can actually end up with two conforming lots if you just do a lot line adjustment.
Yeah.
And I'm not thinking very many. But I don't have a number.
Yeah, so maybe this doesn't work after all. I mean, I think
Want to highlight building encroachments. Is that, if that's really what we're concerned about, then that's what we should start the sentence with.
I still care about the porches and the stoops
Oh,
and some
yeah.
of the historic elements. And surveying in this town is amazing. Our continental drift rate of continental drift in this town is phenomenal.
Awesome.
And I can't get the same survey done in my neighborhood with the same 4 corner points 2 years apart from the same surveyor. And I'm deadly serious when I say this, and why we don't have lawsuits right and left, I don't know. So we have lots of encroachments. They're not intentional. There's just something wrong with surveying in a rather vertical community. And I know in the community of Bisbee, when I owned property there, and I haven't for 10 years, almost 10 years, they didn't even try to survey the corners. They knew they couldn't do it. It was bizarre. But I mean, seriously, I have surveys of my house. I can put my house anywhere I want to on my lot, and I'll bring you a licensed survey of it.
All right, well, I guess I'm trying to get a sense of whether people are kind of, whether we're going to give up on this idea of trying to reduce consolidation based on small encroachments, or whether we would like to pursue it. Let's just ask the question that way and see what people think.
I don't need
Kathy?
the second paragraph. I'm happy without the second paragraph or any of that language.
Peter?
I am also.
Angela? Somebody?
After hearing how little issues there are with that, I would be comfortable removing it.
Let's just hear
Yeah.
from everybody. Todd, Angela, Charles?
Yeah, I can think of a couple of applications in the last several years that have spun around trying to consolidate lots because of small encroachments. And we didn't let them happen. So in the efforts of clarifying things, I think this is okay without the second paragraph. All
right.
To say that it includes decks, porches, roof eaves, and stoops as a justification for eliminating a lot line bothers me.
Can we make that policy, Ron?
Well, I mean, the opportunity is now. If you want to take, if you don't, I mean, if you want to limit it just to the building and not to the ancillary type of parts of the
Ancillary,
structure, then this is the time to do it.
I think that's a good idea, and I don't think this means that they're gonna get chopped off, Kathy. I think they're just not gonna be bases for consolidating the lot line, the two parcels.
So to Peter's point for schedule, if this is hanging up the whole 9 yards here, then because of the schedule and the moratorium, then perhaps we let this go and we review it after that point. And
Well,
see if we
no,
can come
well, I
up
think
with more language.
I think what Ron is saying is we need to do it now, i.e. come up with some agreeable view tonight. I still have not heard the view of one of our commissioners, which is Mr. Dalton. You have any thoughts, Charles? Can somebody unmute him? Piper?
Piper is gone and
John is in charge.
Thank you, sorry.
Okay.
He's doing great. Okay.
I think my concern
We hear you.
is that we don't want people to use the eaves or the porches as a reason to request consolidation. So, I mean,
Correct.
that to me is my big concern is people are just gonna, so if we limit it to, you know, it's the building footprint or it's, I know we can't say substantial, but
Can I clarify if you guys are in this iteration, if you're contemplating just those porches, stoops and eaves for non-historic structures, or if it's for all? Because we talked about a carve out for historic things being what they were, not want to cut off historic porches. But there's categories that are not non-rated. I'm just curious what you guys were mulling over, so I understand how to think about it.
Well, Peter, I don't think anybody's saying that any of this would require anybody to cut off a historic porch. If you have a historic structure and your porch is over the lot line, and we change this so it says you can't consolidate if it's just your porch over the lot line, then you wouldn't consolidate your two lots. You would have one house with the porch over the lot line. That would not be a reason to take the porch down. If it's protected by the historic designation. You have two lots. You may be able to build a house on the other one.
You can't,
How do you get in?
but no, but you can't, what you guys might not realize, and Peter well knows, you can't pull a building permit today if you have a building going over a lot line. So you have a historic building, it desperately needs a new foundation, all new wiring and plumbing, the whole 9 yards. It has a beautiful historic porch. It's 3 feet across the lot line with the porch. Do you want to kill that building? I mean, let's not make Hark have a huge hissy. Let's make, let's be really clear. If you're gonna need that, then you can say non-historic. We need to put that in there, non-historic porches, eaves, etc., stoops, because it's the historic buildings that have the most encroachments.
That's fair. That's a good idea.
And I still would support it without that, but I mean, you can't do anything if your building crosses the lot line with a deck, a porch, or anything. You're not going to get a permit.
Okay, so what we should do is we should, I don't know if the word historic is accurate or if the word is rated. Peter, do you have a word that you'd like us to use here to?
Well, we do have Jonna here who can tell us.
Jonna, yes, great. You're still here. Great.
And Mike Kennedy wants to comment as well.
Okay, but would you
Okay, hold
prefer
on.
historic or rated?
Rated is more specific to contributing and supporting structures. Historic, people will argue with whether it's
Okay.
historic or not. So
Okay.
to be specific, I would say rated.
Okay, except I happen to love non-qualifying historic.
I was gonna say, it's gonna encourage more demolition.
In that case, you would say THAS designated structures, and
Okay.
that covers everything that has a color, red, yellow, green, or blue.
Okay,
Mike?
All right.
I'll go by Tom too.
Oh,
Can we, yeah,
Okay.
Tom, would you like to address it? Would you like to speak again?
Yeah, it's
Tony
just a
Kennedy's in
practical
this.
question. So you have a house that has a back door, it has the deck and some steps, and if you're talking about lines going through it, and you're saying, well, you can't do that, how do you get out the back door? That's what I think. So whether it's historic or non-historic, you still need to be able to get out the back door or in the front door, it's that way. This, to me, seemed more like a side thing, not front and back thing. So just, I'm not an architect, but even that strikes me as odd. So that's
Well,
what I
a
think.
lot of the-
However you're trying to build that second paragraph, you're gonna keep running into those things. Maybe the idea of passing it, just codifying ballot question 300. And if you run across these types of issues and they're becoming a persistent problem, you can always come back and amend it again. I'm just
You
saying,
know,
doing
this
these
is. Thank you, Tom. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
Guys, I'm done.
Okay. Ron, can you put us back on the page that has the famous? two
Yes, please.
paragraphs?
Oh, I'm sorry. I did it on my computer, but.
John, are you controlling who's on the screen? No,
Okay.
it's not me, Ron.
Okay, here we go. Good. Great.
Hey,
All right. So so now we're talking about whether we should adjust the language about open decks, porches, roof eaves, and stoops. And the question is whether we should put it is including, what's the adjective you used, Jonna, again?
THAS rated,
Okay,
designated.
including
Structures.
THA rated, after including, we would put in that adjective.
Designated structures that have decks, roofs, porches, roofs, whatever.
Yes, including open decks, roofs, porches, roofs, eaves, and stoops on THS, whatever it is, AS
Designated, right.
designated structures or by means of a PUD,
And
something
the
like
only-
that.
The only question is, it might in the future create an interpretation issue. I can see someone saying, well, what about a non-THA designated structure? Can you do?
Well, I think if the primary building is encroaching, we want to fix it.
Yeah,
If it's merely a non-THA designated open deck, porch, roof, eaves, or stoops, we don't want to have that be the reason. That's what the consensus, I would.
yeah, I
would like
understand.
to-
I think that's where we're trying to go.
But
Okay.
That answer your question, Matt?
And I
I'm
think if
still
we write it that
concerned.
way, it is clear. I think that's clear, or to eliminate pre-existing building encroachment across lot lines. So if the building itself encroaches, including these items, open decks, porches, roofies, and stoops on THA designated structures.
only
Only.
including open decks.
Only.
Only including encroachments by open decks, by THS designated structures.
No, I think the only goes afterwards, including open decks, porches, roofies, and stoops only on non-designated THA structures only. The only is a little hard.
Wherever, I don't care.
Okay. I think the only goes,
Madam
Okay.
Chair, our planning director still has concerns with.
all right, madam, please speak up.
Yeah, and Delaney,
Yeah.
Tom Kennedy needs to speak again, and he's kind of an expert in this field, so we should
Great.
take advantage of that.
All right, Tom, Tom, you go first and then Ron.
So if you keep the lot separated and you're drawing a line and you're saying the fact that you have a deck doesn't, and it's not historic. So that's not the basis for doing the adjustment. So you still have the back door, you still need to get down, and now you have a setback. You've drawn a line and you have a setback. What do you do in that setback area? So that's really what the problem is, which is I would think that why you had the language drafted the way it was, because you're not only talking about the physical encroachment, you're talking about the setback.
Yes.
Well,
There are,
and let's remember that the whole purpose of this thing is to avoid getting mega lots. We're not talking about moving buildings. We're not talking about eliminating access. We're trying to say you can't use that as an excuse to put two lots together.
And tear the
And-
non-conforming or non-rated building down and build a big house.
Yeah, in this hypothesis, Tom, the person already owns the two lots. They're going in and out of their back door, crossing their second lot. They just can't build a mega house if they can't combine the lots.
They can't even remodel the house they own.
Because it encroaches.
Yeah, because.
Because it encroaches,
Yeah.
but without taking the porch off, which is why we said no historic lots. But if they remodel the house and the porch is not historic, I have no problems with them being required to take it off.
but then they might not have a legal 3-foot setback.
Oh, I see. Well, yeah.
Yeah.
That's fine.
You got fire code
Okay,
challenges, which aren't ideal, are
right.
there for a reason, creating
Right.
separations.
All right. Well, I guess I am convinced we can't really fix this problem.
Kathy has her hand up.
Yes,
I
Kathy.
guess I don't think 2 lots combined are mega lots. They don't allow for that much bigger a house above grade, somewhat bigger, but not huge. I think what we want to avoid is the 3 and 4 lot aggregations or consolidations, whatever word. You know, I think if we had more double lots, we would more likely have backyard units that could be used for employees or for other community benefit without even asking for it. But we're never going to get a second unit on a single lot, and it's on a double lot that we have a chance of getting a second unit and having it be used for a greater community good by the owner's choice. And I don't think the oversized houses are on double lots. The oversized houses are on 3 and 4 lots.
All right. Well, do we have other thoughts about where we're going with this language or paragraph?
I like it just the way it came back to us after town council. I'm getting to feel stronger and stronger about that.
All right. Well, Kathy, with all due
Wasn't
respect,
getting
I
later in
disagree
life.
with you that we will ever get voluntary having any use of any second unit on a lot anymore. I think that those days appear to be over as far as I can tell. But you might be right. Maybe I should be more optimistic. Are there other comments about this, or are we ready for, Ron, is there more of this? Do you need to present to us, or are we
No,
done and ready for motion?
definitely not.
Even close.
Does anybody else want to have a comment now? Is there more public comment? No. Are we ready for a motion? Yes? Does anybody else have any further thoughts? I think we've discussed this a lot. Okay, who would like to make a motion? And Ron has some language up on the screen. Somebody,
do it.
wave- Great, thank you.
I move to recommend to town council approval of the amendment to the Land Use Code, Article 3, Division 2, Zone District Purposes and Standards, and Article 6, Division 4, Subdivision, for the purpose of establishing limits on the consolidation and aggregation of lots for 1 and 2 family dwelling units, with the Land Use Code amendment language attached to the staff memorandum dated July 20th, 2023, and with the findings of the staff memorandum dated July 20th, 2023. This motion is based on evidence and testimony provided at a public hearing held on July 27th, 2023, with notice of such hearing provided as required by the Telluride Land Use Code.
Do we have a second?
I'll second it.
Yeah.
Thank
Peter
you.
seconds.
Peter seconds, great. Is there any discussion? No, can we have the view? Is there any way that I can see everybody? No, all right, so let's vote. I hear no discussion. Let's proceed to vote. Please say your name and your vote since I can't see you. Start with Kathy and go down.
Kathy, yes.
Angela, yes.
Todd, yes.
Bisha, yes.
Peter, yes.
We may have lost Charles, Madam Chair.
Nope, he's back. Charles, wave your hand or something to signify your views. Do we see him? We don't see him.
Can we hear you?
Okay, I'm back.
Okay, good. We're voting.
Charles, we have a motion for the proposed ballot language, or excuse me, the land use code amendment language.
Just make your hand, yes, or
Yes, yes. Can you hear that?
Yes.
All right.
Yes.
Heard you.
Thank you. Good. Eleni, yes. The motion
Sorry.
passes. Thank you, everybody. That was a good discussion. All right, moving on. Is there any board or staff discussion?
I just
Staff?
had a question for Ron about the comp plan schedule.
Yeah, in
have
fact,
one?
I I thought about putting that on the agenda for discussion tonight, but
It's a good thing you didn't.
yeah, exactly. So we'll definitely have it on the next agenda and we'll have thoughts as far as how we want to move forward. But it's definitely on the radar.
Okay, thank you.
All right,
I
thank
have
you.
something.
Yes, Kathy.
I went to one of the STR meetings and it was, I
Ah.
would say, interesting. The one piece of information I really wanted, they said was impossible to get and was not part of their contract. And I would like to maybe at the next meeting, talk about our role in this as we go forward. I know this is also on a fast forward schedule. We have a November deadline. But going forward and going into our comp plan, there's a lot of data that I didn't hear the other day that I think we need. And much of the data we got was like,
Rehashed, yeah.
who cares? You know, so I think we need to have a discussion. I realize that town council is in charge of this, but in the past, we've been very much involved in, you know, we've had everything from 28 days to 32 days and all the rules and stuff over the last 40 years and or 50 years. It was going on long before I was involved. But I think we need to look at this and talk about it and try to figure out how to get the data we want, especially as part of our comp plan.
Yes, I don't see how this is separated from the comp plan in any way. This is an important pre-step to the comp plan. It's too bad that we didn't get more involved in how it was done so that we could get the data that we think we need, but it is what it is. So let's try to get as much information as we can.
I'd ask Kathy to put together some of the questions she has so that we can mull them over.
That would be
Months on it
fantastic,
too.
Kathy.
Okay, I'll try to work on that.
And honestly, if other people would like to add, if you can circulate that or through staff or however way you think is appropriate, then maybe others could think about it too, and we might have other things that, you know, we want to know especially for as we approach the comprehensive plan again.
Yeah, and there was like how they defined condo hotels and how they're managed is totally different than what I've ever thought I've approved. And I don't know whether that we're not enforcing it or whether what we thought we were approving as a planning board has been reinterpreted by town staff and isn't being enforced or what. But I mean, it's like some of our issues wouldn't be issues if we were doing what we passed years ago.
You know, it seems to me, Ron, you can answer me this. Is it possible for us to have these folks who are doing the short-term rental study appear before this commission and answer our questions?
Probably is not in their scope of services, but I can approach the town manager, see if it's something that they would be willing to do.
I would rather have town legal here to explain why some of the things I thought we were doing, we're not doing, or else these people really collected the data very incorrectly.
Well,
Right.
I think we may need both. I would like to ask, I mean, I have some questions I'd like to ask the people who collected this data, and you seem to have some specific legal questions. We should have both, all our questions answered. This is important stuff to deal with as we go into the comprehensive plan. So I guess, Ron, I would appreciate if you would ask them if they would be willing to do that, or if they're not willing to do that, would they be willing to answer our questions in writing? You know, is there some way we can communicate directly with these folks to get data that we would like to have and questions that we would like to have answered? Thank you. And Kathy, let's plan to invite, is Ally has gone home, it looks like.
Ellie is here.
I'm here.
Oh, Ally is here. Ally, are you feeling capable of answering Kathy's questions? So you don't know what they are yet?
Well, I don't know what they are. And I on Tuesday, I was at a conference, so I missed the two presentations that were given. So I have not seen that information yet. I wouldn't be able to answer them anyways.
A lot of my questions and deep concerns are about condo hotels and how they're managed.
Okay.
Well, maybe either you, Ally, or Kevin,
And we,
or whoever is the appropriate person to answer questions about that.
Lenny, Kathy
Yes.
was trying to talk.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear you.
I just said if condo hotels are being mismanaged versus what we did pass in the past, I would like to see that corrected sooner than later. But I'll try to write this all up. I'm not sure when, and get it to Ron to circulate and for have to look at.
And it's something that staff might be able to answer rather
Okay.
than the consultants
Okay,
necessarily.
yeah, I mean, yeah.
Looking at the data and
Mhm.
asking the different
Well,
questions of it.
that question specifically.
Yeah, and Mike, if you want it right now, I mean, it's not, it's 8 o'clock. It's not like it's the middle of the night. I always thought when we created a condo hotel, starting with maybe Hotel Columbia was probably our first one. That they were required, everybody who owned a unit of the condo hotel was required to use the one management company that managed the whole building. And therefore would make sure that the units had the best chance of being rented out by the night when the owner was not in residence. And what I thought I heard these people say, and I think they're probably great, consultants, whatever, was that we had condo hotels that were just random managed. And, to me, if we have condo hotels that are managed properly, they're really running as a hotel and we don't have to count them as STRs. And therefore it gives us a different number and different statistics to look at the rest of the picture. And if we have just a condo hotel, and there we have one unit that's managed by a property management company, another one that's managed by a property management company, and their other 8 units or their other 20 units are all managed by the central management. To me, that defeats the purpose and the way we wrote our approvals in the past. And I think we only have 2 or 3 of these units, so it should be easy to figure it out. And, because then they're, then they're doing what they're supposed to be doing, which is they're being hotels. And we don't have to count them in this mix of how many of the STRs we want and what.
So it's kind of related is long-term,
Yeah.
whether it's designated.
Yeah.
That they can't do any long-term.
Yeah,
housing.
and then I thought the definition of 1 month and longer is long-term rentals. I thought that was wrong. If I understand in the residential zones, 6 months and longer is long-term and is not under the limited days and what weeks and months of a residential zone.
I believe it's a state law.
Okay,
That's 30
well,
days or more.
but we can be more restrictive. I don't think there's a state law that says that, in terms of charging taxes, maybe at a 1 month time frame, we can't charge taxes but we might still be able to charge fees. But I think our definition is that 6 months or is longer, because a 1 month rental doesn't do anything for our community. A 6 month rental lets somebody live here seasonally and participate in our community as a worker or as a full-time community member.
I'm fairly certain our definition is 30 days or longer, not 6 months or longer.
Okay, well, we used to have 6 months or longer as long-term for the residential zones. I don't know about whether that applied to the accommodation zones or not.
Not as it relates to short-term rental.
Yeah, short-term rental, it's a 30-day or longer 3 times a year. I don't know where
Yeah,
there's a.
so that's, we get to do that, but then you have like 6 months, you use up all your days in months in less than 6 months. And then I want to do something. I always thought we were encouraging 6 month rentals, as you didn't need a license, you didn't need fees, you didn't need yayas, anything, if you were doing 6 months or longer. And I want to make sure that we define long-term as 6 months or longer. And we can call it, come up with something else, a name for the 1 month rentals. And that's fine if we can't collect fees because of state law.
I think staff can answer your question. I mean, we can work with our town clerk's office, since they're the ones that actually administer the short-term rental licenses, and town attorney. But we can try to answer your question.
Yeah, and I think if there's 1 month rentals, then they need the same thing of a contact person and all of that, because they're going to impact the neighborhood or the rest of the condo building very differently than a 6 month rental.
I was under the impression that even if you're in the residential historic area, that you still even though you have restrictions of 3 and 3, you still need an STR
Yes.
to do that, which means you
Yes.
need the contact, but you still have
Yeah.
all those
But
regulations.
I think we have people that live in condos that will tell you that it would be nice to have a contact person for the rowd partier that's come for the, a month in the winter time to ski a month and parties every night.
Yeah, I mean, they should though. They should be having, if they have that license attached to it.
Well, they
Oh, you're
don't
talking about the condo.
condos in a
Got it.
different zone
Got
district. I think Angela's experienced that.
Yeah.
So you're talking about accommodations
Maybe
to,
from the second floor into the pool, yeah.
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 But don't you need a license in biking as well?
No,
Well, you would need a
If-
short-term rental license.
Yeah.
That's what I mean. It
Yes, you would.
requires a contact person.
Right. Who may or may not care.
Well, that's a different story.
That's hard to regulate.
yeah,
That's hard to regulate.
Available.
Yeah,
Available or, I mean. I may
responsive,
Telluride Lodge,
right?
Yeah.
so somebody
Responsive is
shows
hard
up
to regulate.
and has a wild, who do I call?
Right.
Because every individual condo is managed by somebody else.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the rental portion has a license attached to it, which requires a contact person, but they might not be responding, which is
yeah,
the
but
problem.
how, so you want the neighbor that's being adversely affected, almost maybe in an emergency sense. They have to go to the town website, find a list of
Yeah,
licenses, which might not be even possible, search it by the unit number,
Call the
find the
marshal's
contact
office.
person,
yeah, yeah.
and what's the marshal, we need
Yeah.
to make this, somehow different. and that
Streamlined.
Became very apparent to me in these meetings. That's not working.
Kathy, I think this is another instance where we have regulations set up and it comes down to our ability to enforce a lot of these things. Because we have noise ordinance
Mhm.
Right.
and it just requires enforcement.
And HOA management and, we have all the things. But yeah,
And that can be from 0 to 100%.
Yeah.
Anywhere along the spectrum.
Well, I have a question for Phil. Phil, are you going to be at the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting?
Hey, I'm here.
Hey, Phil.
Are you going to be at the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting? Or are you,
I'm going to be remote for the next Planning and Zoning Commission meeting.
okay, but you'll be at one more meeting.
Yes, I will.
Okay,
So we can have the party here.
Yeah. We can
Perfect.
virtually wave cake at you.
I like that.
Yeah.
Cheers.
I will not be at the next.
Are you gonna be virtual, Andrew and Angela?
Pardon me?
Are you gonna be virtual?
No,
No, I'm gonna be in Portugal.
Oh, well, that's very nice.
Portugal.
That's good. All right. Well, hopefully we won't have quite such a consequential meeting next time. But it's always important. We love you people virtually too. Is there any other discussion? Ron, just to go back to what we were just discussing for a moment. I think that we still might want to have the opportunity to look at the short-term rental study. And if people would like to have a short presentation from the consultants, please, let's get our questions together and let Ron know. And if we don't need to do that, fine, we won't bother them. But we'll try to figure this out by next time. Everybody will look at the rental study and let you know if we'd like to hear from them or not. Because I think I have some other questions, but I need to put them together better.
Right. I think their scope of work from the sounds of the article in the paper is strictly economic. I
Yeah,
want to know about the social part of that. Because
Well-
78% STRs in the town means that there's only 22% residents.
So
No.
no, 78% of our hotbed base, so of the available short-term
Right.
rentals, 78% of them
Right.
are.
But
Not-
they have, right, but the turnover was an interesting statistic from 2019 to now. And so effectively, the social impact of all of that is something I'm not sure who is interpreting. And I think that's maybe more of the,
well, they might be
Yes.
able to either have generated or be able to generate pretty easily figures about some of the things that you want to know about, like how many long-term residents are there as a percentage of the total occupied spaces or whatever? How
Right.
many of the
How many
housing,
houses are empty?
how many housing units are occupied by permanent residents?
I don't think they
Versus
did
not.
any of that from what I heard and saw.
Well, let's try to see what we're interested in and see if any of this comes within the scope of their work. And if it does, we can ask them about it, and if not, not. So I think that's for next time, but we can think about it in the meantime, because we're not ready to do it now. At least I'm not.
Please do attend our full council meeting and ask your questions one there as well.
And when-
That's a great idea, Dan. When is it?
can you-
Tuesday.
This Tuesday?
This coming Tuesday, 10 to noon.
Okay,
10 to noon is the work session, and then I think we cover it again in the afternoon.
is there any other topic that we would like to discuss in board and staff discussion? All right, seeing none. It is 8:06, and I adjourn this meeting by unanimous consent. Thank you all for your work.
Thanks, Eleni.
Thank you, Elaine.
Thank-